The laughter didn't stop right away. At first, it was just one deep, booming chuckle echoing across the prison recreation yard. Then another, then a few more voices joined in, louder this time. Mike Tyson stood perfectly still. Across from him, a 320-pound inmate leaned back against the rusted weight rack, hands on his knees, laughing so hard his face had turned red. Tears gathered in the corners of his eyes as he shook his head in disbelief. "This is him?" the man said loudly. "This the Mike Tyson everyone been whispering about?" Around them the yard went quiet, not the kind of quiet where everything stops all at once. The kind where noise drains away slowly, like air escaping a sealed room. Weights stopped clanking, basketballs bounced one last time and rolled away. Men who'd been pretending not to look suddenly found reasons to stare. Mike didn't react. He didn't smile. Didn't clench his fists. Didn't move an inch. The big man laughed again, louder now, enjoying the attention. "Man, I thought you'd be bigger," he said, wiping his eyes. "They sent you in here looking like somebody's little cousin." A few inmates snorted. Others shifted uncomfortably, already sensing that something was wrong. Because laughter in prison is dangerous, especially when it's aimed at the wrong person. The 320-pound inmate stepped forward, towering over Mike, blocking the sun. His shadow swallowed Mike's feet. "You lost, champ," he said. "This yard ain't for celebrities. This place'll eat you alive." Still, Mike said nothing, but his eyes lifted slowly, locking onto the man's face. And in that moment, several inmates who had seen Mike fight on the outside felt something crawl up their spine, because they recognized that look. It wasn't anger, it was focus. The same look Mike Tyson used to get right before the bell rang. Within minutes, that laughter would die. Within hours, the story would spread across the entire facility. Within days, inmates who had laughed would pretend they hadn't been there at all. And by the end of Mike Tyson's first week in prison, no one would ever laugh at him again. To understand how a simple moment in the yard turned into a lesson, the whole prison learned the hard way. You have to go back to Mike Tyson's first days inside, when he was still new, still watching, still deciding how to survive a place that doesn't forgive weakness. Because what that 320-pound inmate didn't know was that Mike had already tried to avoid this. Twice. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe for more true-style prison legends and comment below telling us where you are watching from. Now back to the story. Mike Tyson arrived at the correctional facility on a gray morning that felt heavier than it should have. Not because of the weather, because of what the gates represented. Steel doors slid open with a mechanical groan, then slammed shut behind him with a finality that no amount of fame could soften. That sound followed you. It stayed in your head long after the echo faded. This wasn't a boxing arena. There were no cameras, no cheering crowd, no bell to save you when things went wrong. This was prison. Mike was 26 years old, only days into his sentence. On the outside, his name still carried weight. In here, it meant something different. Sometimes respect, sometimes resentment, sometimes a challenge waiting to happen. From the moment he stepped inside, Mike understood one thing clearly. The first week mattered. In prison, the first week is when people test you. Not always with fists, often with words, looks, laughter. The guards processed him like everyone else. Orange uniform, prison-issued boots, a thin mattress rolled under one arm, no special treatment, no shortcuts. That alone surprised some inmates watching from behind the railings. They'd expected arrogance, entitlement, some sign that Mike Tyson still thought he was above everyone else. They didn't get it. Mike kept his head down. His answers were short. Yes, no, I understand. He wasn't afraid, but he wasn't stupid either. He'd learned long before prison that ego gets people hurt. The cell block he was assigned to housed a mix of inmates, long-term guys, short-timers, men who worked out constantly, men who never lifted a weight but still carried themselves like killers. Everyone watched everyone. Mike noticed it immediately, eyes tracking his movement, whispers that stopped when he got close. That quiet, measuring look men give when they're deciding something. He ignored all of it. He made his bed, learned the schedule, listened more than he talked. By day 2, the rumors started moving faster than Mike ever could. That's really him. Man looks smaller in person. I heard he ain't the same no more. Still dangerous, though. Prison feeds on stories, and Mike Tyson was a walking one. The yard was where those stories came to life. That was where size mattered, where strength was visible, where dominance wasn't claimed. It was demonstrated. Mike went to the yard when his unit was released, just like everyone else. He didn't rush to the weights, didn't try to prove anything. He walked the perimeter, stretched, took it all in. That's when he noticed him for the first time. The 320-pound inmate stood near the weight area like he owned it. Big didn't even begin to cover it. The man was tall, broad, thick through the chest and shoulders, the kind of body built from years of lifting iron and eating every calorie prison life allowed. His arms were scarred. His knuckles looked permanently swollen. Other inmates moved around him without thinking twice. Not fear exactly, more like recognition. This man had space. Mike didn't know his name yet, but he could read the signals easily. The way conversations dipped when the man walked past. The way nobody challenged him for equipment. The way he laughed, loud, confident, unafraid. That laugh wasn't friendly. It was territorial. The big man noticed Mike too. At first it was subtle, a glance that lasted a second too long, a smirk shared with another inmate, a low comment Mike couldn't quite hear. Mike pretended not to notice. That was intentional. Because in prison, acknowledging someone too early can be as dangerous as disrespecting them. On the third day, Mike heard the laughter for the first time. Not directed at him. Not yet. The big man was telling a story to a small group near the weights. Whatever it was, it had them laughing hard. He threw his head back, chest puffed out, enjoying the attention. Then his eyes drifted over, locked onto Mike. The laughter didn't stop, but it changed. It sharpened. The big man leaned toward his group and said something Mike still couldn't hear. All of them turned to look. Mike kept walking. He'd promised himself something before he ever entered those gates. Don't give them a reason. Not in the first week, not while everything was still uncertain, not while everyone was watching to see what Mike Tyson would do when pushed. What he didn't know yet was that the 320-pound inmate had already decided. This wasn't curiosity anymore. It wasn't joking. It was a test. And in prison, tests don't go away just because you ignore them. They wait. By the fourth day, everyone knew something was brewing. Not because of a fight, because of the waiting. The 320-pound inmate hadn't touched Mike, hadn't threatened him, hadn't even spoken to him directly. Yet, instead he did something worse. He turned Mike into entertainment. It started small. Whenever Mike walked past the weight area, the big man would chuckle under his breath. Loud enough to be heard, soft enough to pretend it was nothing. Man, prison really changing these celebrities, right? He said once, not looking at Mike. Used to be dangerous, now look. A few men laughed, a few didn't. Mike kept walking. The next day, it escalated. Mike was stretching near the fence when the big man dropped onto a bench nearby, deliberately crowding his space. He grabbed a pair of dumbbells and started repping them with exaggerated effort, grunting loudly, slamming them down. You see this? He said to no one in particular. This is what a real fighter looked like in here. Then finally he looked directly at Mike. Not no washed-up TV fighter. That one landed. The yard went quiet in pockets. Not total silence, but enough that everyone knew they'd just crossed into something else. Mike felt it, that old instinct, the one that used to make him step forward instead of back, the one that had won him belts and lost him control. He swallowed it. He stood up slowly, rolled his shoulders, and walked away. That decision didn't go unnoticed. Some inmates nodded, impressed by the restraint. Others shook their heads. In prison, walking away can mean wisdom or weakness, and the difference depends entirely on who's watching. The big man watched Mike leave and smiled. That smile wasn't relief, it was confirmation. Later that afternoon, the laughter returned, louder, more confident. This time it followed Mike. As he circled the yard, the big man called out, "Hey, champ, you shadowboxing or just practicing running away?" A few inmates laughed openly now. Others glanced toward the guards, pretending not to hear. Mike stopped walking, just for a moment. He closed his eyes, took a slow breath through his nose, then kept moving. That was the second time. The second time he chose not to respond. And in prison math, that mattered. Because two walkaways can look like patience, but to the wrong person, they look like permission. By the fifth day, the mockery was no longer subtle. The big man had gathered a small audience near the weights. When Mike entered the yard, he clapped his hands loudly. Yo, 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 look who it is, he announced. The baddest man on the planet. The words were sarcastic, cruel. He stepped forward, arms spread wide, like he was presenting Mike to the crowd. Man, I thought you'd be scary, he said. I thought you'd come in here throwing bombs. Instead, you just walk, lapse, and stretch. He laughed again. This time, fewer people joined in. The laughter was thinner now, nervous, because some of them were starting to feel it too, that tension in the air. The big man took a step closer to Mike. You saving it for something, he asked, or you just ain't got it no more? Mike stopped, fully. He turned around slowly, meeting the man's eyes. For the first time since entering the facility, Mike spoke. Enjoy your workout, he said calmly. That was it. No insult, no threat, no raised voice. He turned and walked away. The yard buzzed immediately. Some inmates looked shocked that Mike had spoken at all. Others were stunned by how calm he sounded. A few nodded, understanding exactly what that response meant. It wasn't fear. It was control. The big man stared after him, his smile gone now. That was the moment his mood changed. Because he hadn't gotten what he wanted. He wanted anger. He wanted a reaction. He wanted Mike to snap. And instead, he'd been dismissed. In prison, being ignored can be more humiliating than being challenged. The big man clenched his jaw. He didn't laugh anymore. He didn't speak. He just watched Mike walk away. And in his mind, he made a decision. If Mike Tyson wouldn't react to words, then words were done. The sixth day was hotter than the rest, the kind of heat that made tempers shorter and patience thinner. The yard smelled like sweat, dust, and rusted iron. Even the guards looked irritated, shifting their weight in the towers, scanning more than usual. Mike felt it the moment he stepped outside. Something was different. The laughter was gone. The comments were gone. The big man wasn't performing anymore. He was waiting. The 320-pound inmate stood near the pull-up bars, arms folded across his chest, eyes locked on Mike from the moment he entered the yard. No smile, no sarcasm, just intent. Mike clocked it instantly. He adjusted his path, keeping space between them. He wasn't afraid, but he was aware awareness kept you alive in places like this. For a few minutes, nothing happened. Men lifted weights, others paced the fence. A basketball bounced rhythmically on the cracked concrete. Then Mike stopped near the water fountain. That's when he felt it, the space behind him disappear. Before he could turn fully, a heavy shoulder bumped into his back. Not hard enough to start a fight, not soft enough to be accidental. Mike stepped forward, catching himself. The yard froze. That kind of contact wasn't casual. It wasn't nothing. Mike turned slowly. The big man stood inches away, towering over him, looking down with a calm, cold expression. Watch where you're going, the man said. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Mike looked up at him, eyed steady. You walked into me, Mike replied. A few inmates inhaled sharply. That was the first direct exchange. The big man smiled faintly, not amused, satisfied. Nah, he said. You just ain't used to how things move in here yet. Mike nodded once. Then we're good, he said. Let's keep it that way. He stepped to the side, clearly trying to end it. That should have been enough, but the big man took a step too, blocking him. You always this polite, he asked? Or is that part of the act now? Mike held his ground. I don't have a problem with you, he said evenly. I don't want one. The big man leaned in closer. That's where you wrong, he said quietly, because everybody got a problem with somebody in here. Question is who you choose. Mike felt the eyes on them. Dozens of them. This was no longer private. This was a yard decision. Mike lowered his voice. I'm choosing peace, he said. Step aside. For half a second, it looked like the big man might. Then he laughed. Not the booming laugh from before. A short, sharp sound. Peace, he repeated. Man, you in prison. He shoved Mike's shoulder, harder this time. Not enough to knock him down, enough to make a point. The yard erupted in noise. Some men shouted, others backed away instinctively. The guards shifted, hands hovering near radios. Mike didn't swing. He didn't flinch. But his body changed. His stance widened slightly. His shoulders relaxed in a way that didn't look relaxed at all. The big man noticed. "You gonna do something now?" he asked. "Or you just gonna keep talking?" Mike took a slow breath. "I've walked away from you," he said. "I've ignored you. I've been respectful." His voice was calm, but different now. Lower. "I'm asking you one last time," Mike continued. "Leave me alone." For a moment, the big man hesitated. That moment mattered, because hesitation means doubt, and doubt is dangerous for men who build their image on dominance. The big man's jaw tightened. He stepped forward again, chest almost touching Mike's. "Or what?" he asked. Mike didn't answer. He simply stepped back. Not in fear, in control. He turned his body slightly, signaling he was done with the conversation. That should have ended it, but the big man couldn't allow that. Not in front of everyone. Not after days of mocking, laughing, pushing. He reached out and grabbed the back of Mike's shirt. Hard. The yard went silent. This wasn't joking anymore. This wasn't testing. This was a line crossed. Mike stopped moving. He didn't turn around right away. He closed his eyes for a brief second, because he knew something now that the big man didn't. There would be consequences. And once this went further, there would be no taking it back. Mike felt the fabric of his shirt tighten in the big man's grip. Rough, intentional, public. The yard didn't just go quiet this time. It locked. No weights moving, no voices, no footsteps. Even the wind seemed to stop. Mike stood there, back still turned, the 320-pound inmate's hand clenched in his shirt like a claim of ownership. For a split second, it looked like Mike might let himself be pulled back. That's what some inmates expected. That's what the big man expected. Instead, Mike spoke. His voice was low, controlled, almost calm enough to miss. "Let go," he said. 2 words, not shouted, not rushed, not angry. The big man smiled, leaning closer. "Or what?" he whispered. "You gonna show everyone why you famous?" Mike turned his head slightly, just enough that the man could see his profile. "This isn't what you want," Mike said. A murmur rippled through the yard. That sentence hit different. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a boast. It sounded like a warning given for the other person's benefit. The big man laughed softly. "You've been warning me all week," he said, "and I'm still standing." He tightened his grip and gave Mike a sharp yank backward. That was it. Mike turned, not fast, not wild, deliberate. He faced the big man fully now, eyes level, posture settled. Anyone who had ever boxed or watched boxing closely felt it immediately. This wasn't a prison stance. This was professional. Mike's feet adjusted on the concrete without him looking down. His hands came up, not raised aggressively, just ready. The big man saw it too. For the first time since this started, his smile vanished. "You serious?" he asked. Mike didn't answer. He glanced past the man briefly toward the nearest guard tower. The guards were watching closely now, fingers on radios, bodies tense. Mike was calculating. Witnesses, distance, timing. He looked back at the big man. "You've had your fun," Mike said quietly. "We're done." The big man hesitated. That hesitation stretched just long enough for the yard to feel it, because something had shifted. The laughter was gone. The mockery was gone. All that remained was uncertainty. The big man didn't like that feeling. He stepped forward and shoved Mike hard in the chest. "You don't tell me when we done," he said loudly. "I tell you." Mike absorbed the shove without stumbling. He exhaled slowly through his nose. Then he spoke one last time. "If you touch me again," he said, "you're gonna regret it." Silence. That sentence landed heavier than any insult. The big man looked around, aware of all the eyes on him. A few inmates had already started backing away, creating space. The yard was choosing safety over curiosity. The big man's pride flared. He raised his hand slightly, mockingly. "Oh, I'm scared now," he said. Big Bad Tyson finally found his voice. Then he stepped in again and raised his arm. He didn't even finish the shove because Mike moved. What happened next didn't look like a prison fight. There was no wild swinging, no shouting, no chaos. It was over almost before the yard understood it had started. As the 320-pound inmate lifted his arm, Mike stepped inside the motion. Not back, inside. The big man tried to bring his weight forward, thinking size alone would carry him through. That kind of move worked on smaller men. It worked in bars. It worked in crowded cells. It didn't work here. Mike's left foot slid half a step to the side. His head moved just enough to avoid the incoming shoulder. Smooth, economical, almost lazy. Then the first punch landed, a short, brutal shot to the body, right under the ribs. Not flashy, not loud, but devastating. The sound wasn't a crack. It was a dull, hollow thud. The air exploded out of the big man's lungs like someone had punched a hole through him. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. His eyes widened in pure confusion as his body forgot how to breathe. Before his knees could react, the second punch came. A compact hook, tight, perfectly placed. It caught him on the jaw as his head dipped forward, using his own mass against him. For a fraction of a second, it looked like the man might stay upright. Then his legs betrayed him. The 320-pound inmate folded. Not dramatically, not violently. He collapsed straight down like someone had unplugged him. Concrete met flesh with a heavy final sound. The yard went dead silent. No cheering, no shouting, just shock. Mike took one step back. He didn't chase, didn't add anything extra, didn't even look angry. He stood there, hands lowered, breathing steady. The big man lay on the ground, conscious but completely stunned, chest heaving in shallow, panicked gasps. His body tried to obey him, but the signals weren't getting through. A few inmates rushed forward instinctively, then stopped. No one wanted to be next. The guards reacted immediately. Whistles blew, boots hit concrete, radios crackled. "Back up! Everyone back up!" Mike raised his hand slightly as the guards approached. "He touched me first," Mike said calmly. "Twice." Multiple voices answered at once. "He grabbed him. He shoved him. Tyson warned him." The guards looked down at the man on the ground, then back at Mike. They didn't see a riot. They saw two punches. Clean, controlled, finished. Medical staff arrived within minutes. The big man was rolled onto his side, still gasping, eyes glassy, pride shattered long before his body recovered. As they lifted him onto a stretcher, he finally managed to pull in a full breath. The sound he made wasn't a groan. It was a sob. Mike stepped away without being told. As he walked toward the fence, the yard slowly began to breathe again. No applause? Not yet. But every man there understood the same thing at the same time. This hadn't been about strength. It had been about restraint. The yard didn't explode after the stretcher rolled away. It settled. Men spoke in low voices. Eyes followed Mike, but no one stepped into his path. The usual tension, the constant edge, had shifted into something else. Clarity. The guards pulled Mike aside near the fence. Not aggressively, not gently either, just procedural. "Turn around," one said. Mike complied without a word. They checked his hands. No cuts, no damage. That alone told a story. They asked him what happened. Mike answered simply. "He grabbed me," he said. "I warned him. He didn't stop." They asked the yard, and for the first time since Mike had arrived, inmates spoke in unison. "He started it." Mike tried to walk away all week. He warned him. No contradictions. No hesitation. The guards exchanged looks. They'd seen fights before, plenty of them. What they hadn't seen often was discipline, real discipline, under pressure. Mike was escorted back inside, not to segregation, but to a holding room while reports were written. That detail mattered. By the time Mike returned to his unit later that evening, the story had already outrun him. Prison doesn't need phones to spread news. It travels through whispers at chow, through looks in the hallway, through one inmate leaning over and saying, "You hear what happened in the yard?" Details changed as stories always do. Some said it was one punch, some swore it was three, Others said the big man never even touched the ground. Mike didn't correct anyone. He didn't talk about it at all. That night, as Mike lay on his bunk staring at the underside of the bed above him, he replayed the moment in his head. Not with pride, with exhaustion. He hadn't wanted that. He tried to avoid it from day one, tried to stay invisible, tried to let the week pass quietly. But prison had reminded him of something he already knew deep down. You don't get to choose whether you're tested, only how you respond. The next morning, things were different. Inmates who had laughed earlier in the week suddenly found reasons to look busy. Men who had brushed past Mike before now gave him space. Some nodded, others simply stepped aside without being asked. No fear. Respect. The kind that doesn't need noise. One man from another unit stopped Mike near the water fountain. "That dude okay?" he asked carefully. "He'll be fine," Mike said. The man nodded once. "Yeah," he said. "Thought so." The 320-pound inmate didn't return to the yard for days. When he did, he stayed near the fence. No crowd, no jokes, no comments. His presence had shrunk, not physically, but socially. Men who once laughed with him now watched him cautiously, because prison remembers, and prison never forgets who crossed a line and paid for it. Mike's first week ended quietly after that. No more tests, no more mockery, no more laughter aimed in his direction. Just space. And in prison, space is safety. By the end of Mike Tyson's first week in prison, something invisible had changed, not just for him, for everyone. The yard felt different. The noise was still there. The tension never fully gone, but the edge had dulled. Men moved with a little more caution, a little more respect for boundaries, because they'd seen what happens when intimidation meets discipline. Mike didn't become loud after that. He didn't walk with swagger. He didn't claim territory or try to build a reputation. He went back to his routine, stretching, walking laps, keeping to himself. But the difference was unmistakable. Nobody laughed anymore. Weeks later, an older inmate who'd been down for most of his adult life sat beside Mike during yard time. He didn't crowd him, didn't test him. He just talked. "You know why that spread so fast?" the man asked quietly. Mike shrugged. The man nodded toward the yard. "Because everyone saw you try not to be that guy. And when you had no choice, you finished it." Mike was silent for a long moment. "I didn't want to hurt him," he finally said. The man smiled slightly. "That's why it worked." That moment stayed with Mike long after his sentence ended. Years later, when he spoke about prison, he didn't talk about violence. He talked about restraint, about control, about how real strength isn't loud. It waits. The 320-pound inmate recovered physically, but his standing never did. In prison, reputation weighs more than muscle, and once it's cracked, it never quite heals. Mike Tyson served the rest of his time without serious incident, not because he was feared, because he was understood. A man who tried to walk away, a man who warned first, a man who acted only when pushed past the last line. And that's why the story spread, not because of two punches, but because in a place built on dominance, one man proved that discipline beats intimidation every time. Mike Tyson was only days into prison when a 320-pound inmate laughed at him in front of everyone. Mike ignored it. He walked away, he gave warnings, and when he was finally left with no choice, he ended it in 2 seconds. Not with rage, not with chaos, with control. Sometimes the strongest move isn't throwing the first punch, but making sure you never have to throw a second.